right, hello and welcome back to another session of AT University's Lunch and Learn series. We're sponsored once again by Information Technology and Services and co-sponsored with Human Resources. So thanks for joining us once again for the show that shares information on tips, techniques, and trivia about what's going on at AT University. We should have a good show again. We've got a quick rundown for you. And you'll see in the seat opposite me is our usual Joe Vincent. We had a little staff poll before the show what we should call the session, and the main segment was supposedly going to be titled "What Will Joe Say Next?" but we've modified it, and we're going to kind of turn the tables on Joe and put him in the hot seat there. So there you go, Joe, a little hot seat.
Yeah.
And we're going to have Joe talk to us today about training and compliance, and really why. Why do we need to do training and compliance? So that's kind of right up his alley. In addition to the training and compliance, we have some additional goodies for people. We will be announcing the winner of the March version of the lynda.com mug. So you can see Joe has his there, and we'll be announcing the March winner of that. We have some information on Zoom that we'll be sharing. And then we also have Tim Johnson for our Break to Educate session. Today's kind of dedicated to the why. So this is our why series. Why training and compliance, and why do we have to do monthly maintenance? So we'll kind of answer those questions for today. And then as always, please share your questions, thoughts via the chat on the live stream. Send those in and we'll kind of monitor them and try and get everyone's thoughts and information into today's session. So with that, we'll go to Joe. And Joe, you've been here, what?
I started in June.
June, so
yeah.
Just about a year?
Getting close.
Yeah, and training and compliance was one of the big topics, yeah?
It was, yeah. That's one of the central parts of my job.
Not just spamming everybody about training and compliance?
Well, that happens to be a large part of it turns out. And it's good for employee relations. I feel like I'm well known campus-wide, and I guess that's a good thing. At least they know my name, and any news is good news in some circles. So at least they know my name. It's interesting some of the sentences I think my name is used in.
No, it's great. You do it with a lot of fun and excitement, so it makes people really interested in at least clicking on the open the email link.
Right, for the first few dozen times. Right, and I get that. And it's interesting, when I started, I had a rough idea of what it was going to entail, the position. And I knew sort of where ATSU was in terms of their level of compliance and the broadening scope of the environment, what sort of laws we had to be in compliance with. And that's even continued to expand since I started. And it's really kind of taken on a life of its own.
So yeah, kind of dive into it for us. I mean, we offer lots of different training opportunities. What makes this particular set required as opposed to some of the other training opportunities we have?
Right, so like the $1 million question, why in the world do we have to do all this stuff? And it's a great question, and I anytime I go to answer it, I have to sort of say first, man, I realize some of this is painful. And some of it you've read so many times, you could probably teach it. And I get that. But there are actually some really good reasons why this stuff is important and why we have to review it every year. And what we start with is basically we have to understand that as a university, there are several pieces of legislation, federal, state, local, that sort of give us guidance. And they affect all of our employees and all of our operations. Some pieces affect some employees more than others, but when you look at the broad scope, we've got a definite set of laws and policies and guidelines that are going to affect everything ATSU does. And those sets of laws and boundaries, they sort of set up acceptable business practices. And it's something that when I started to discover, because when you think of ATSU, a lot of people think of a medical school. And for those of us that have worked here longer, and I don't necessarily put myself in that group, but as I've worked here, discover, we're educating doctors, we're doing dentists, we've got these allied health professionals. Then add on top of that, we're operating healthcare clinics. Some of the things that I didn't realize at first, we're operating our own health plan. ATSU is self-insured for a lot of the health insurance that we offer employees. all of those different segments of ATSU's operations are covered by different pieces of legislation and regulation, which has some requirements on it that include reviewing what the requirements are every year and making sure we can demonstrate that. Then there are other pieces. We employ a lot of people. Then we have a lot of students on top of that. And when you get into our student base, we've got students that are here and living here, and so then there are laws that apply to them. Then there are students that we may very rarely see, or but once or twice in their entire time with us, and there are laws that apply to them. And with our employees, the same way. The ones that have an office and come to a campus every day, and then the ones that work off-site, or the ones that may work a couple of weeks out of the year. And it's amazing how the conditions for all of those different subsets, they start to draw in different pieces of regulation that we have to be aware of and mindful of.
Right, but it sounds like it's not just the regulation kind of components that you're talking about. So there's the regulation component, that's probably the main thrust of it, but it also has some culture because we are a healthcare institution, so just learning about HIPAA compliance or bloodborne pathogens, that also kind of helps us to understand a little bit more what some of our students might be going through.
Right, and prepare them for what they're going to be doing in the future. But it actually is really relevant for most people who are working at ATSU. And this is maybe it will come as a surprise, and this is why I'm really glad we got the opportunity to talk about this. There are several sections of federal regulation on top of ATSU's Board of Trustees sort of prioritizing, here are things that we need to be aware of and review every year. And the main ones look like this. Actually, if you've been through the employee training, you've seen these modules, but if we can throw those up there real quick. Every year, we've got to review the staff handbook. And it's amazing. The Department of Labor has some stake in pieces in our handbook that we have to be able to show we've reviewed every year. The departments in the federal government that give us grants and award money for us to do research and try out new educational techniques. There are pieces in the staff handbook that we have to be able to show we've reviewed every year.
So like, give me an example of one of those.
Okay, great. So for wage and hour, it's a subdivision of the Department of Labor. We have to be able to show that we've established procedures for how we award vacation benefits, medical leave, how we deal with disciplinary warnings and escalating discipline, how we deal with times off, like family medical leave. All of those have to be spelled out.
And not just showing that we as an institution have those policies, but that the employees know about those policies.
That's right, and that's something that we'll get into here in just a little bit, but it's not even as important that, it's important that we have the process, it's important that we follow the process, but in the middle of that, we have to be able to demonstrate that we've at least made all of that information available, and we can actually verify that everyone's reviewed that information on an annual basis. And that's just one. With like the grant funding and award funding stuff, there are things about political activities and engaging with lobbyists and what you're allowed to spend grant money on and not. That's part of our staff handbook. And those organizations, when they award us grants, one of the things they ask is, do you have a stated policy about political activity and using our funds for uses other than the reason we're giving them to you? And we have to say yes, and they say, do all your employees review that, and are they aware of what it is? And we have to say yes and be able to demonstrate that. Otherwise, it puts our ability to accept grants in jeopardy. That's just the handbook, right? So that's number one.
That's one out of, what, 8 of them?
Obviously, we know we've got a ton of students. I'm gesturing over here, and it's over, I don't know where it is. It'd be, yeah, it's this hand. Da-da, like that. So we've got FERPA that says students have rights. As soon as they attend their first class and for the rest of their lives, any sort of educational record you create on their behalf or about them, they have rights to look at and ask for you to edit and ask for copies of. We have to know what those are because they also have rights as to how those things are disclosed or not disclosed and their ability to be able to manage that. And so they have rights that we have the potential to violate because we hold a lot of that private and confidential information as a part of doing business as an educational institution. So we have to review that every year.
And I assume it's not just HR's responsibility. When we start talking about things like FERPA, the registrar's office, for example, probably has a lot of input into that material.
That's right. For the FERPA in particular, the registrar, and this is the way I characterize them, they're our FERPA experts. They put together the training. They stay on top of what's changing with the law. And we attempt to do that as well, but they're sort of the hub. If you've got a FERPA thing, you go to the registrar. And when we've done these live sessions, it's something we've done this year that I don't think we've done a lot in the past. We've been doing a lot of the training in a forum setting, or at least making that available. And when I get a chance to actually talk about it, I say, when in doubt, even if you might doubt whether or not there's a doubt, call the registrar's office and ask them, because they're our experts and they know everything and they will guide you the right way. But being in compliance with that law is incredibly important. And then you go down the list. We're required to make sure we have a drug-free, alcohol-free workplace. That complies with 2 or 3 different sets of federal legislation. The tobacco-free workplace is something that the Board of Trustees feels like is in line with our mission. It complies with who we are as an institution, and even though no one outside of here is telling us we have to do that, that fits with who we are. That's part of ATSU's DNA. And so they want that reviewed, and they want to make sure employees understand that on an annual basis. HIPAA, you mentioned, is another big one. HIPAA hits us 2 ways because we operate clinics. So when we accept patients, we have to let them know that we understand what their rights are. They should know what their rights are. Here's how we plan to use their information. And Brian, you know, being a part of the ITS infrastructure, a lot of our HIPAA compliance is in the way we store things and transfer information. That's a monster. And part of that, actually written into the law, is do all of your employees review the expectations of HIPAA every year. So it hits us with the clinics. It also hits us with our health plan because everybody knows Trina. Everybody loves Trina. She helps make sure our insurance works the way it's supposed to. She has all of our personal health information. And there's an infrastructure that travels through where we have to make sure we safeguard our employees' rights because we have so much of their information.
I think what people sometimes don't realize is that we have to comply with HIPAA regulations anyway, and so there are lots of things that go on with that. Employee training is really only one small part of that,
right.
But it is part of HIPAA regulations, is that we have to inform our employees about HIPAA and all of the regulations associated with it.
Right, I think the assumption sometimes is, okay, I know the law that I'm supposed to follow. Stop asking me if I know about the law I'm supposed to follow. Yes, I know the law I'm supposed to follow, and that's great. But more importantly than that, most of these legislative pieces have written into them a part that says, are you annually reviewing this with all your employees? And when we get visits, something that we might talk, I think we do talk about here in just a little bit, but when we get visits, that's one of the questions auditors or reviewers ask to see is documentation of our annual reviews. And can we show and prove that we've diligently communicated certain pieces out on an annual basis? So there's more of those. OSHA has a couple of big pieces. Obviously, we got a lot of blood and body fluids flying around, and so we have to know how to safely deal with those. Lots of chemicals. Did you know whiteout is considered a hazardous material?
I did not know that.
Okay. Even down in the mailroom, Brenda, in the mailroom in Missouri, has tanks of envelope sealer. So she doesn't have to lick every envelope that goes through. That's a good thing. For those of us who've seen Seinfeld, we all know the catastrophic consequences that come from that. And so we don't want Brenda licking envelopes. But the sealer, which I suspect you could probably take an entire vat of it and dump it over your head and you'd be just fine. But it's considered a hazardous material. And so it has to be labeled, it has to be stored properly. We have to have those sheets that describe what sort of ingredients it has and what you should do if you're exposed in a certain way. All of that is part of OSHA compliance. And not just doing it, but making sure that our employees know what's been done and what their resources are to a point where we can say, yes, we've communicated that, and they should all at least have access to that information.
I can see the links in the comments right now to clips from Seinfeld.
Yeah. Well, it was like Newman's. See, I'm not even a Seinfeld guy, but even I know about like Newman's fiance that died from licking envelopes, and we don't want that happening.
So for anyone who's out there, give us the clip. We'll put it in the comments.
Yeah. We need to have that. We need to have that. And if Newman's fiance had her OSHA training, we might be not even talking about this. It'd be a whole new reality. So let's move on here, because I know I spent a long time on that and I didn't intend to, but it's amazing what a monster it is. The amount of legal compliance that we have to make sure we do is huge. And we do our best to distill it down into pieces that are manageable, because that's not even most people's jobs. And I appreciate that. That's just doing something so that we can do our jobs. And so for a lot of people, having to go to the computer every year and complete that training, several might opt for like a hammer to a finger just so they could get it out of the way. And I totally get that.
So a question that's coming in here is,
oh, good.
Why
People
every
are watching.
year?
This is great.
Yeah. Why every year? I mean, some of these things are not even part of some people's jobs. Mm-hmm. They really don't have any hazardous materials that they work with. They're in an office type setting where it's minimal type of contact, even if it is with whiteout or something like that. Why do they have to do it every year? Could we not just split it up somehow and have half of it, 1 year, and do it every other year or something like that?
Yeah, if it were up to us, we could probably do whatever we wanted. The next slide that I threw up here, actually the first thing it says is every employee has to do it every year. And in some cases, the requirements even say the annual review has to be accompanied with some sort of information delivery that happens when a person is hired. We're not dealing with, and this is important to understand, maybe you hate me a little bit less if you know that I didn't make up the every year thing. The president didn't make it up, the board of trustees didn't. For most of these pieces, what we're talking about is a regulatory requirement that says on an annual basis, have you re-delivered or reminded all of your employees that here are the regulations, here's how they work, and here's how you comply with them. So especially for things like FERPA, HIPAA, drug and alcohol, OSHA, we're not getting off the hook. If a regulator shows up, they want to see annual review.
And do you guys have any idea what the kind of average amount of time or the expected amount of time is to go through all of that training?
It depends. If you're a first person, if this is your first time through and you're going to be thorough about it, you could probably spend an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours if you're going to read all the material and make sure you've got it all down pat, which I think is a good idea.
So it's not overly burdensome, 2 hours out of an entire year.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, I could spend 2 hours eating nonstop and not be burdened by that. I think 2 hours, I can watch Sons of Anarchy for a couple hours, no problem. But 2 hours is a lot when it's something you hate to do, but it's not a lot of time. When we consider how many things we have to cover, we're not really expected to do a whole lot to reach a level where we're considered to be in compliance. And we're doing a good job of that. That's part of the thing is, last year we redesigned the Blackboard course a little bit to try to make everything more accessible. Blackboard isn't the most user-friendly information delivery system ever invented. But there are some ways to make it easier. And we did that, and I think through millions and millions of emails and a little bit of increased accessibility, this was actually ATSU's best year on record in terms of compliance. Now, nobody really wants to celebrate that because then it means they got 1 million more emails, and we demonstrated that 1 million more emails works.
Right, nagging works.
Right, exactly. But it did, and so it puts us into a place. We had been around the 65, 68% mark for the last 5 years. And what that does is put us in a place of exposure. Because, and I keep wanting to skip down, I left this part, there are some dangers that are posed by not being...
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Let's maybe take a quick break. I see you've got a thing about compliance here, but we can roll that in
Sure.
to the next section. We'll talk a little bit about compliance and reporting, and we'll come back then with Joe and talk a little bit more about training and compliance. But I want to go to a different kind of training now and hear a little bit about Lynda training, lynda.com training, and we'll see who our winner is of the March coffee cup from lynda.com. All right, so congratulations, Amanda. That's great. We'll get the cup to you. And for everybody else who's watching, Amanda, if you're watching, you can shout and yell and scream, high fives. Everyone else give the virtual high five to Amanda, and we'll get that cup to her. So be prepared, do your lynda.com courses for next month, and we'll do it again. So let's get back with Joe. And I know when we left, we were talking about compliance, and kind of who do we have to provide this reporting to?
So every year, our general counsel takes a report to the Board of Trustees that talks about all of the training activities that we've completed in the last year, sort of gives them summaries. And even things like the lynda.com training, and if that's catching on and people are latching onto that and using it, we talk about that stuff. And in that report, we talk about our level of required compliance. So we've got a lot of things that say things like, here are some training things we tried, here's how they went over, here's what we're thinking about next. And then there are those required pieces and how we did, and we actually deliver a percentage to the board. And the board monitors that sort of as like the caretakers of the university and making some of the directional decisions. And they want to look and see that we're doing the things we need to do to keep the university safe. So the board is the main regular reporting body that we send to. Now, what's interesting is the risk really shows up with some other people that might sporadically ask for.
Yeah. So what happens if we don't do this training? I guess.
Right. And that's so that's what we were trying to I was hesitating to get into too quickly, but this really is about risk aversion. Like, we identify risk, we try to figure out how we can avoid that risk and mitigate it and make the university as safe as possible. When I was first here, I ran into a group of students. I was wandering around, and they asked me what I did. And I have the boringest title on the history of the planet. And it's good. It is what it needs to be. But when you say it, you can almost see it's like they ate a Brussels sprout or something. And so I said, well, look, let's just put it this way. From what I understand, I make sure that your degrees actually mean something when you get them. And for employees, it is we make sure that we still have a job to come to, that the university is still in good standing, because there is a lot of risk associated with not appearing to be in compliance. And so that goes several different ways. Our accrediting bodies want to see annual compliance training happening among all our employees. And so it's actually interesting. I sent some emails just last week. Our Missouri Dental School was going through an accreditation visit, and they needed records for all of their employees to show annual training completion and descriptions of the modules that they completed. That was part of the visit that they want to be able to put in their report and say, these people are making sure they're compliant with federal regulations. That probably would have thrown a wrench in things if we had said, yeah, we don't really like it, and we don't really feel like we have to do it every year. And so that's something that's important. Same with like KCOM. I know that or maybe it was SOMA, one of our medical schools had a recent accreditation round that they went through. Same kind of thing, where we needed to report numbers. That can start to really put the university in a vulnerable position if we haven't already completed those things and don't have records of those. Beyond that, the next sort of visitors that we might get are ones from federal agencies that are sort of the caretakers of certain laws. So for instance, the Department of Education is the caretaker for FERPA and even some others. But they want to know that it's being done correctly. And part of compliance with FERPA is saying, yeah, we review it every year. So that we're talking to our employees, we're talking about their responsibilities since they have this information, and even ones that aren't seeing it every day, since they potentially have the ability to be exposed to this information. When you think about it, I like to tell our professors, after our faculty, who are seeing student records all the time, the most likely employees to be exposed to confidential student information are our maintenance staff. Because a computer that was left on, or papers that were left out on a desk, a conversation that takes place in a location that's not the wisest or most secure, and you've automatically divulged information to people who don't need to know it, maybe not be equipped to deal with it, and have a likelihood of violating some students' rights in the process. So do maintenance workers need to receive student privacy rights training? You would say no. And we would say, yeah, absolutely they do. Sure. Same with patient rights. We're in the midst of people who are going to the doctor. I walk through a clinic lobby all the time. I know who's going to the doctor. I could know which doctor they're going to. Even without knowing any more information, I have the potential to violate a patient's rights at one of our facilities. Just by knowing certain information, if I were to divulge that in a way that they felt like violated their privacy rights, I'm now in a position where I hold information that I can share and put that information in jeopardy. Do I have the wrong slide up? What I'm trying to say is there's a lot of risk associated with the types of information that we hold. There's risk associated with the type of operations that we undertake, and it's easy risk to mitigate.
Right.
As long as we're doing the little pieces that we need to do. And then for
It's really
employees,
helping people become more professional.
Absolutely.
You know? So it's really, in addition to the regulatory component of it, I think there's an aspect of it that's just making you a more aware employee, a more professional employee, and kind of knowing what the norm is. And I think it's maybe your last slide where you talk a little bit about kind of what the role of the employee should be. And I like the term that you used about it becoming part of our culture.
Yeah, and that's something that I know that's an eye roller, because at least I sense it is, because that's my job and it's what I see all the time, every day. And so, but I would like for it to become the sort of thing where first we have to embrace the idea that our employee base, all of us, including me, I have the power to decide whether or not ATSU is in a position where some of our abilities to operate are threatened or whether those are safeguarded. And then when you start to look at something as simple as just getting the employee training done, that seems like a pretty simple step. If that's the only step I really need to take to make sure that I've done my part to safeguard ATSU in those regards. And once we realize that that responsibility lands on us, it really should become part of our culture. I would like to see, and I don't know how long this would take, I would like to see it become a thing where instead of some of the maybe groaning about, oh man, we got to get our training done, I'd love to see a culture shift where we say, hey, you're the only one in our office that hasn't gotten their training done yet. And we'd really like for you to finish that up because we're tired of looking irresponsible. And that happens when we start to realize that the responsibility really does rest on us to make sure that the university is safeguarded like that.
We found peer pressure is a good influence.
Yeah, I like positive peer pressure.
It is.
And that's one of the things that my office made sure we did this year was let supervisors know how they were doing. And some of that is negative because they say, wow, you're doing worse than them. But a lot of that was positive because there were a lot of supervisors where their supervisor could say, hey, you're doing an awesome job, and I appreciate you covering our back on this one.
You know, you talk about culture. I think the sense of responsibility that comes out of it is good, but I think there's also kind of a future-proofing component to it. The way that things are changing with work in the workplace, you always have to be learning things. So to have some of this required training that you go through, I think it kind of preps us a little bit for being able to go online and learn things at a given moment.
Yeah.
A moment in time so that you can apply it then shortly thereafter. I think that's kind of the future.
No, that's true. And that's probably the areas where my office has started sort of sticking our toes and our fingers into, because there is this required stuff. But as like you say, like that culture of training becomes more ingrained in us, there are pieces we are looking for our employees to start taking advantage of on their own. Professional development is, maybe this is a risk to say this, it's become less and less going back to school for a number of years to get one piece of paper. And it's become more and more progressively identifying areas where I need to become more competent. And ATSU is always making more resources available at no cost to be able to immediately become a content expert in sort of sub areas that are going to make me able to do my job better. Lynda.com, you know, we joke about it, we're giving away mugs, and I think, oh, that's great. That could be one of the greatest resources ATSU's made available for free to all of our employees, because they literally run the gamut. Every sort of professional development, from the very technical to the very sort of leadership and how do I interact with people type skills, they're all on there. And we're watching. In fact, we're making contests and we're reporting numbers to the board, because we'd like to see our employees start to take that sort of initiative and develop themselves in the office.
And I think the required training and compliance is a great part of that. So Joe, I think you guys are on the right path. Thanks so much for sharing it with us. I hope the seat wasn't too hot for Joe.
Yeah.
We're going to take another little break and give you some information about Zoom and video conferencing. And then we're going to come back with Tim Johnson, the manager of our technical services, and talk a little bit about why we have to do maintenance every month. Zoom. All right, great. We're back. That's a great tool. We've gotten lots of great feedback on that tool, so please try it out if you haven't. A couple questions before we go to Tim for Joe, just to follow up on the training. One question was, give us a sense of kind of how the curve goes over the year. How many people actually finish before December, or do you see everybody finishing it up at the end of the year?
Right. Yeah. No. There's a good sized group of people that are going to jump on it as soon as it's released, and we usually do that release in June or July, and try to take the second half of the year, those 6 months, to make sure it all gets done. That's typically what's been done. There's a huge burst at the beginning, then you'll have the trickling 10 or 15 people that'll do it every week, and then obviously there's kind of a big boom at the end. We did a great job with getting adjuncts and some of our more sporadically engaged employees, off-site people that only work a few weeks a year. That was a group that we worked on and made a lot of ground with. We'll continue to make more ground. Those were a lot of the end-of-the-year people, because maybe they hadn't taught in a while, and we kind of had to catch up with them and have them do it. So it's been pretty good. It was good in the last, I guess I should say, I've only been here 1 year, and I thought it was pretty darn good.
All right, good.
So
compare to this year and see if there's any difference.
That's right, yeah.
So if someone's interested in going right now, how would they go about getting started?
Well, they wouldn't start right now. We're in the development period right now, where we have pieces. Actually, it's not ironic, but it's interesting that you ask. The Department of Education came and visited and did a review in the last 6 months. Some of the things they had us do dealt with upgrading a couple of our key policies that we review every year. Those policies are actually in a review process with the Department of Education right now. Okay. So we have to wait on them to have policies that we're then allowed to go out and send for review. In addition to that, we're dealing with different delivery systems, maybe trying out something that's not Blackboard, that might be a little more user-friendly. And so this period gives us some time to goof around with that stuff and demo and rebuild. And then typically it's been released in July. We may get it out sooner than that, but you notice you haven't gotten a lot of emails from me in the last few months. I promise it won't be that way forever. And
oh, thank you.
Although I know you missed them, they will begin again. Rest assured, I'll let you know as soon as it's up and ready to go.
Oh, great. That tells us why we need to do the required training. We'll get back into it maybe June, July time frame.
Yeah, I think that's probably reasonable to expect.
So similar to the emails that you get from Joe, you should be receiving emails pretty regularly each month talking about monthly maintenance windows. And so with us to kind of talk about the maintenance window is Tim Johnson. Tim is our manager of network technologies. And so Tim, why do we have to do the maintenance every month?
It's on you now.
It's on me now, okay. Well, there's three big reasons we do maintenance every month. First and foremost is we try to schedule all of our software upgrades around those monthly windows to add features or put in newer versions of software. The second reason is there's updates constantly coming out from Microsoft, from all of our vendors to fix different software glitches and problems that our customers have experienced. So we take that window to apply those updates. And third, we take that opportunity to basically give all of our systems a restart and kind of clear off any data that may be hanging around in the back end causing systems to not perform to their full potential. So that's the opportunity we use to get everything running again. And most of the time, if we've done it right, you'll never notice it happened. And when you come back to work on Monday morning, you sign in your computer, and it's just like you left it on Friday.
So typically, when are these scheduled, and why have we chosen those times?
Jean Varnold in our help desk area will contact all the different deans for the different schools every month. Well, about once a year, and she puts together a full schedule that takes into account peak student times, testing times, and such. So we try to avoid those different areas, and so we try to pick areas where it'll be the least impact on our community. And typically it's a Friday night, Saturday morning, midnight to 6 a.m. Central time window, and so we can limit the impact to all of our users. So Friday night, we found from our statistics, a lot of people are wanting to take a break from school, whether you're a distance student or a residential student. So it's a good time to do it. And then when you hit the books again Saturday morning or even Sunday morning, we got all of our maintenance done, and you can continue doing your education.
Now, I know that we've tried at different times to play with the schedule a little bit, go a little bit longer between maintenance periods, sometimes schedule things for a Monday or a Tuesday evening rather than a Friday evening. But it seems like we've kind of shifted back into that Friday evening period. Mm-hmm. What were some of the downsides with moving things around? So
we found with some of our systems, campus management is a good example. The longer we waited to reset that system, the worse it got. Another one is Blackboard. And Blackboard is probably our most difficult system to do maintenance. And that system really did not like going longer than a month. And our users experienced unexpected downtime. So that's why we wanted to go back to that month, so then that way at least, yes, it's once a month, but at least it's a time you'll expect. And the rest of the time, the system stays running.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So rather than having some unexpected downtime and having more time in between maintenance periods, it becomes more intrusive to people because it was unexpected maintenance.
Exactly. And to be clear, maintenance does not always equal downtime, because there's a lot of maintenance that we do that does not require a system to be taken offline. Over the years, the university has done a lot of investments in our infrastructure, so we can get to a point where a lot of our systems are redundant, so we can do maintenance on a portion of the system and not take the whole service down. But other systems like Blackboard, which when we do software updates, unfortunately, we have to take the system offline to do that.
Right. So talk to us a little bit. My understanding is that we have kind of 3 different categories of maintenance. We talk about emergency maintenance, we talk about kind of special maintenance, and then this routine maintenance. Tell us a little bit about each of the 3 of those.
Okay. So an example of routine maintenance would be Microsoft releases updates for all of its system on a monthly basis. They call it Patch Tuesday. And a lot of our desktop systems automatically will download those patches, and we leave it up to our customers when they want to reboot those systems. So on the server side or in the applications, we schedule those within the window. So we scheduled those about Wednesday. We start pushing those out to the systems, and then we put a deadline on that to go to our Friday downtime window. And then during that time, the systems will automatically apply those patches and reboot the system. So that would be an example of routine. But there's certain systems, such as our internet connections infrastructure, that for some reason with vendor scheduling and such, we can't get them to perform the work with our own schedule. So we have to schedule those special times to perform that maintenance. And those are becoming more rare because of the redundancy that we've added within our system.
And I would think that because so many of our systems are dependent upon other vendors or other service providers, that we have to kind of coordinate some of that maintenance schedule with them.
Exactly. And that's a big part where those special maintenance comes along, is to incorporate their schedules as well as into ours. The third one, which is the emergency maintenance, unexpected things do happen. We in the network technologies group, we call it the chaos monkey, and we do have a little symbol on our wall with a chaos monkey. And every once in a while, Ian will have a picture where he gets into one, like on a mug or something. It'll just be that chaos monkey looking in there. But things just happen. Whether it's an accidental change that we made or unexpected glitch does come up, and so emergencies do happen, and we do have to perform some kind of maintenance or reboot or restart. And sometimes if there is an outage on a system, we get it up as quickly as we can. And other times, if we can, we'll try to push that into an off time. Midnight to 6 typically is again a low time for our usage. So we'll try to wait until then to complete that.
So we actually do look at usage patterns and try and schedule things.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, I think that kind of helps people understand a little bit why we have to do the maintenance. It's really to try and prevent and be proactive against issues that might come up. So just like we have to reboot our computer systems every now and then, the servers and the network equipment kind of work the same way, and I think refreshing those helps keep everything stable. So once again, thanks, Tim, for joining us and giving us a little bit of feedback on why we do maintenance. And thanks, Joe, on the why we do training and compliance. We will be back in a couple of weeks with another session, and I would like to say, to point out to everyone, next week is assessment week. And so there are a couple of additional kind of lunch and learn topics. We're really not branding it or marketing it as lunch and learn, but as part of the assessment week, and Joe and I will both be involved in some of those sessions, kind of moderating and bring that to you. So if you get a chance, please participate in assessment week next week and watch those online sessions. Till then, thanks, and we'll see you soon.